So this is a filler video, bonus video. I did Game Boy reading Wikipedia video, and while I have this, I figured I would do all the things that when you do a video and you kind of get into it and you're like, well, what about this, what about that? There's no room for it. I guess that's what this will be. Title screen.
Bringing arcade game quality into the home. Taking it out of the home is another story.
One of the initial comparisons that I wanted to make was iPhone XR, whatever it is, 2018 or something like that, and Game Boy. Obviously one is much deeper, but they are very similar in their form factor. One of them has a better screen. They're basically the same thing. Like your first cell phone. Like this could have been it. There was a whole thing for putting a microphone. You could have an audio channel through the cartridge slot. If there isn't a Game Boy cell phone, I don't know. Get on that, but it's interesting. You could have some kind of cartridge that has a microphone and a whatever, cell phone modem. And then you could have the microphone. It's kind of reverse, but whatever, because this is the speaker. It'd be kind of dumb to be like this.
Hello?
But I guess that's how you'd have to do it if you wanted to do it like straightforward.
Hello?
So upside down would be the form factor of the Game Boy cell phone. It could be done, hypothetically. How would you do dialing? It would be so slow. You'd have to like arrow around and whatever, like you're putting in your initials for a high score. But I guess my point was, I'm starting with the stupidest one first, and then I'm gonna move into some more detailed stuff. The point, this video is for a rainy day. This is for when I need something to just post. The form factor of the Game Boy, this vertical form factor of the popular ones, the Game Boy, and then Atari Lynx came out, and then Turbo Express, and then Game Gear. This is the smallest, and Lynx was huge. And this vertical kind of orientation, I think, is a very good ergonomic. Good for adult hands. Things getting smaller, that was always a thing that we looked at as being kind of ridiculous. I would have thought that by 2015, that the phone would be like this tiny thing that would have just been hooked on your ear or something. I never would have thought back in whatever early Y2K that phones would become bigger. Everything seemed to be getting comically tiny. And that was kind of a complaint, like, oh, everything doesn't need to be tiny. Well, instead you just make them do more things. I think it was a really good form factor. Other than like the fact that this little plug, this has nothing to do with the form factor, but the link cable plug is this little plastic thing that you can lose. Not that it matters that much, but it's kind of weird that, like, of course kids would lose this, the way this pops out, but whatever. Other than that, it's very well designed. For me, the Game Boy was like this just really cool looking thing. It's kind of like sometimes you really appreciate the things you never had. And the fact that this is so simple, and I like things that are economy. And I view this as like an economy gaming system. Everybody else was trying to be hot shots, and this was just a basic thing that played games. And better than the Game & Watch, you think of the Tiger Electronic LCD games. I tried playing that when I was playing around with this. And yeah, those LCD games are super, super cheap, right? They're cool collectibles, but not something you want to play. And the fact that there's actual games for this where you go, oh wow, this is a really fun game, says something. And it's a simple game machine. And I think if you have nothing else, like in today's world, we have way too much choice. You have too many games, too many people like me making videos about anything. This is from a time period when limited choice is a good thing. And I think the other thing about this is, I guess there's, again, whatever the structure of this is, this particular thing has an issue. When you power it off of the batteries, it doesn't work. And this thing works when you connect to the DC jack, which is what this is for. So the thing about, you say stuff about, phones now and, everything's not user serviceable. Well, this thing uses tri-point screws. So Phillips head is 4 points. It's whatever you would call it. So you can't use a Phillips head screwdriver, no matter how small, to take apart this. There's 2 screws here, and then there's 2 screws there. So taking this thing apart, they really didn't want people to take this thing apart. And really, when I was a kid, I used to take my toys apart all the time. So obviously, if you got something that's a little more pricier than a cheaper toy, that it's if you don't put it back together correctly, our parents going to be calling, asking for a refund or whatever. So this is just them getting ahead of that. But it is interesting that on the side it says, by the way, this is the DMG01 model number. And everything, DMG stands for dot matrix game, because that's what the code name for this was. This is a dot matrix screen. And so it says use only DMG 03 or 05. Well, really, this is a 6-volt DC power barrel connector. 6 volts. So a AA battery is 1.5 volts times 4 is 6 volts. And this is totally overly complex because it's not like you can't buy a DC plug or a battery pack for this for, probably like $10. I'm sure that's very cheap, but I just decided to make my own. The whole thing with barrel plugs, you think, oh, goddamn barrel plugs, they're like the bane of your existence because it's there's so many different sizes. Well, the purpose of that is so that it's so if 6 volts is this particular size, you can't plug a 12 volt in and blow it out. So it's not like using USB-C where it's the device tells the power supply how much current it can take. This is just a dumb electrical connection. So how does this work? It's just, again, needlessly complicated. The reason this is in a flashlight is because this has space for 4 batteries. A lot of today's stuff, oh my God, 3 batteries. So many things today are 3 batteries. Well, when you charged AA's, you gotta charge them 2 at a time. So for me, I was just looking for something that had slots for 4 batteries, so I can do 6 volts, and then wired it to the bottom terminals as opposed to putting it on the top. Why would I do that? Why wouldn't I just wire it to where the power would normally go out, which is where the light bulb would be, which I took out of this. I could have this be both, but I don't want to do this because this is can be a lantern. This could be your backlight if you really wanted to hook a light bulb up to it, but I don't want to do that. I did it that way, so that way it could just stand on its own. If I did it the other way, if I was running the cord out there, I wouldn't be able to do that because you have to screw this in and this part screws. So you'd have a cable going in through a thing where you'd be screwing it in. So what would it have to wrap around? It wouldn't work. Overly complex would require a much longer cable. So that's the story of that. And then it's this line is there is an on-off. So this is just so you can see, because everything's worn away. Just to show the speaker. Just what the speaker quality is. It's mono. It sounds pretty good. I don't think anybody would be complaining. I know they're pumping the whole stereo sound thing on the front, but I think most kids probably wouldn't even notice the difference. The way they do stereo on this is very extreme. It's left, right, or center. And also, just the emphasis on contrast. So you would think oh, why don't you boost the contrast all the way? Like, why? That's one of those things, you know, you're writing something and you go, there's a contrast dial. Like, why does this need a contrast dial? Doesn't it need as much contrast as possible? But boosted all the way is like this. It's full dark. And then, obviously, without it is like there's no image. So depending on your viewing angle and your lighting conditions, you might want, like if you're like this, you might want it lightened up. Obviously, I'm not going to change my lighting conditions, but you know, it's basically, you might want it a little darker, you might want it a little lighter. So there is kind of this, like in between here and here, where it is actually useful. And it's cool because it makes it so there's more than one way you can see stuff. So you can kind of, for each game, kind of just easily change it. I guess the last thing is, this is coming from such a time when there was so much advancement, where every year was about making the year before it obsolete. And so it was easy to say, oh, the Game Boy, you know, the Game Boy was the weakest system. But that's usually the Nintendo case. Only with the Super Nintendo was there really the argument of how much better it was.
The next generation from Nintendo. Now you're playing with power, super power.
And I mean, yeah, there was some argument with PlayStation versus N64, but really what it comes down to is that you're really thinking, what has all the games I like? For the Game Boy, I think it's reflective of the way Nintendo, I don't know, I guess was aware of public consciousness about supporting something. And whereas a lot of companies, it was blitz forward, just forget about the past. So to be like, oh yeah, they were giving Game Boy support till like 2003, seems kind of ridiculous. It's also the highest selling portable of its time, or of any console up until that point. They gave all this support to the Game Boy, and it also sold the most, you know, through different iterations of it. But it is a very good looking thing, but I could see how it would be kind of get lost in the progress of time, right? Like, so games that you could do in a car trip, because you don't want to run out of batteries in the middle of it, and games would become more in depth, like it would become a deeper experience. But in terms of just like casual, simple fun, I don't know. I think it's good. But that's all. That's all I got. Game Boy. Bonus filler video.
You can take it to the lake. You can take it on a date. You can take it anywhere you want to go.
Go with the power of the NES, right in the palm of your hand. Game Boy, the state-of-the-art compact video game system for portable handheld video action.
Don't you know? Every cellular phone, no matter how small, no matter how perfectly tiny and miniature, every month a new one smaller and smaller, but somehow more powerful, crammed with more amazingly clever but needless features. I'm sorry, I believe I got off point.